Hey everyone, today I wanted to take you back in time to year 1 of the game, when DBD had just released and everything was new. Currently we have 243 perks in the game, a shockingly high number. However, back in 2016 and upon release, there was just 9 teachable killer perks and 11 universal killer perks. There were 12 teachable survivor perks and 13 universal survivor perks, a total of 45 perks. Today I simply want to look at these 45 perks. The issue with the early days though, and a shocking fact despite this reasonable number of 45 perks, is that even back then they overlapped a lot, and there was a substantial amount of imbalance between the two sides. Back then, killers debatably had a single slowdown perk, which was Sloppy Butcher. Wait, no, they didn't have that even, because back then Sloppy Butcher essentially gave the current hemorrhage effect, and nothing else. All it did was drop more blood. It didn't apply the 20% mangled effect like it does today. Essentially, killers had no perks to slow down the game in any fashion. This was compared to the survivor's access to multiple generator speed perks and healing speed perks. For the survivor side, they had Prove Thyself, a perk which originally gave a stacked boost to healing, sabotaging, repairing, and opening gates whenever another survivor was within 8 meters of you. For each survivor, you would gain a 3% boost to these actions, up to 9% with all 4 players together. Leader did a very similar thing back then, and applied this same 9% bonus, except onto a survivor when they were nearby. Resilience did, and still does, give a 9% boost to every action when injured. For healing, you had Botany Knowledge, able to speed up heals by 30% and increase medkit efficiency by 30% also. Self-care enabled a 100% bonus to self-healing with a medkit, and also the ability to self-heal at just 80% the regular heal speed. One of the strongest options was Will Make It, which gave you a 100% boost to healing speeds for 2 minutes whenever you unhook someone. This was stackable up to 300% if you got 3 saves. Spine Chill gave a 6% boost to repair, heal, and sabotage speeds whenever the killer looked at you within a 36 meter range. No One Left Behind gave a 15% boost to unhooking and healing when a gate was powered. So there was a lot of that versus the killer's nothing. This was only accentuated with early day perk combinations. The worst offender was probably Self-Care and Will Make It, which worked together, and allowed for 280% self-heal speed when timed correctly. We also had the old toolboxes, which had between 80 to 180 charges, compared to the current 16 to 32. Medkits were also in the old states, and there was a plethora of overpowered add-ons for these items. The anti-hemorrhagic syringe could heal someone from dying to healthy instantly, and the brand new part could repair a generator instantly, so killers had a lot against them back then, with no means to slow these things down aside their power. The main things killers relied on seemingly were chase/information perks, and things that could marginally increase their speed in game: brutal strength, enduring, agitation, etc. Counter perks are a category I want to discuss also. These are the perks that were clearly meant to be the mirror of one another for each side. Take Bitter Murmur and Dark Sense. Bitter Murmur allowed you to see survivor auras for 6 seconds whenever the exit gates were powered. Dark Sense, see the killer's aura for 7 seconds when the exit gates are powered. I know it's small, but why is there a second of difference? Unnerving Presence. Survivors in your terror radius have an 8% extra chance of triggering skill checks. Skill checks have reduced success zones of 15%. This is not happening. Increase skill check zones by 30%. My best guess is that when first developing the game, they probably thought, well, as survivors have little way of fighting back and simply take damage, then we need to give them the favor in the perks. My point isn't necessarily that they should have numbers that cancel each other out. The ideal situation would be to have a perk that can counter another, but do so in a way that doesn't just directly cancel out that perk's ability, but instead works around it or counters it in some form. My issue overall with these perks is that if they are going to function in this mirrored fashion, where they face each other, they should at the very least do the same numbers. The one set of mirrored perks that seem to directly cancel one another out was Predator and Lightweight. Predator made scratch marks remain visible for 3 seconds longer, and Lightweight made scratch marks fade 3 seconds sooner, so there's that at least. Still, the vast majority are not like this. Spies from the shadows. 75% of the time, a disturbed crow will give you a visual cue when within 36 meters. Calm Spirit reduces the chances of alerting woodland creatures by 95%. This leads us into our next category. Perks that just sometimes don't work. This is a small category admittedly, but still worth covering, I think. Tinkerer was a perk that was highly powerful for some characters, but did little to nothing for others. Originally, Tinkerer gave the effect of a 15% boost to the effectiveness of charge time add-ons for your power. For someone like Billy, this was amazing, but only applied to a couple add-ons, the best being Carburetor Tuning Guide and Primer Bulb, which resulted in Instasaw Billy. For the vast majority of instances and add-ons though, this perk would literally do nothing, with only a couple add-ons for each character that it could multiply on. Small Game was a survivor perk, and gave the very specific effect of revealing trappers' bear traps when within 6 meters of one. This one was quite literally just focused on Trapper, and had no effect elsewhere for the other two killers of the time, Wraith and Billy. We then have the perks that only sometimes worked. As mentioned before, Spies had a 75% chance to activate, and Calm Spirit had a 95% chance to activate. There was also a much greater impact of perk tiers back in the day, which affected how a perk functioned. For example, Iron Will 1 made you 50% quieter, but did so only when you were standing still. Spies from the Shadows 1 would just work 25% of the time, and only do so in a 12-meter range. There were also cases like with Agitation, where perk tiers would just remove effects. Agitation 1 had a 6% boost to movement speed when carrying a survivor, but would increase your terror radius by 0 meters. Moving on, there was an early days practice with perks and also many add-ons, which was just giving a negative downside for no reason in particular. For example, Lightborn would increase your resistance to blindness by 60% and increase blindness recovery speeds by 45%. For whatever reason though, it also dimmed your vision by 10%. Not a lot, but an unnecessary nerf, particularly for the extremely dark 2016 DBD. On the flip, Shadowborn made your screen 20% brighter, as well as extending your field of view like it does today. However, it gave debatably a bigger downside than the perk's upside. You get blinded 50% faster and take 75% longer to recover from blindness. As mentioned before with the inconsistent perk tier effects, Shadowborn 1 would give you a 5% brighter screen. It wouldn't widen your FOV at all, and it kept the negative side effects only slightly reduced. So far I've basically just referred that survivors were much stronger when it came to perks. However, killers did have some things. Brutal Strength broke stuff 30% faster, and Enduring back then gave a 75% reduction to stuns. So not bad. Killers did also have a decent number of tracking perks. My main issue with them though is that they were all fairly weak, or by the current day standards, niche. Predator, as mentioned before, made scratch marks remain 3 seconds longer. Bloodhound made bloodstains stay 3 seconds longer, and made them a lot brighter. Whispers had the same effect as it does today. Spies from the Shadows would highlight disturbed crows to you within a 36-meter range, 75% of the time. That was it for tracking though really, and apparently Spies was one of the best choices because of that, despite how horrendous by today's standards it seems. Was that really the best stuff they had? Well, probably not. Out of everything, what were the killer's best perks? Tinkerer was good in some cases. Unrelenting gave a pretty decent effect of a 9% reduction to the cooldown of missed attacks and a 6% reduction to successful attack cooldowns, so a mini save the best for last effect. No One Escapes Death was a regular perk back then. It would instead activate when an exit was opened. It would make all survivors insta-downable, and gave the additional effects of an 8% reduction to missed attack cooldowns and a 5% boost to your movement speed. Objectively, that might have been the best perk, power-wise. Let's now take a look at the best stuff survivors had. Sprint Burst on a 20-second cooldown and the ability to recover it whilst running. Adrenaline, which performed basically the same. Self-Care, Iron Will, Saboteur and its ability to completely remove Trapper's traps and hooks from the game entirely will make it, and its 300% heal speeds, Spine Chill and Resilience. I do realize with all of this said, and all that I've outlined, that this doesn't take into account all of the other things around the time like add-ons, powers, and whatnot, but I do still think it's interesting when looking back and comparing it to today, to see how stuff has been adjusted and changed, and just seeing the initial ideas and presumed thought process that must have gone behind these perk concepts, as there is an undoubtedly huge imbalance between the two sides. Killers generally get small things that make them mildly better at doing stuff, and survivors get insanely busted perks that can completely alter the course of the game. It's worth also taking into consideration that this was the release of the game, so people largely didn't know what to do, and so many of these overpowered things I'm describing probably weren't as bad as they would have been if they existed today, because people hadn't mastered the gameplay and such yet. In fairness, many of the issues with the perks I've described were altered across the next year or so, and many killer side perks became pretty intensely powerful, although this stayed the same for survivor perks too. My main assumption with these is that killers were meant to be a lot stronger originally, and so the buffs they got from perks was meant to reflect that, where survivors perks would be a lot stronger because they were weaker and required teamwork. How much this worked out though I think is debatable, but that's pretty much my conclusion. I do hope you enjoyed, and let me know your own thoughts, or anything I missed, anything you remember, or just any aspect of the video you feel like discussing more. Let me know down below. It's always very interesting reading through your comments. Thanks, and goodbye.